today? Can we do something fun? Fatima? Anything? No? Ivan? Anything? No? Love?
How do people forgive themselves?
When you get to be my age, maybe older, you think back on all the things you have done and you laugh. It's beautiful. So just wait another 30 years.
About you're punished in one way. How can you still be forgiven, right? Punished for doing something wrong, then you hurt other people, through your actions. You've already been punished once. Like the family.
Okay. Since both questions are somewhat familiar and similar in many ways, I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with some of the shows on Hulu. There's a 4-part series about Hillary Clinton. And on one of the parts, they talk about Bill Clinton and the episode that took place in the White House with Monica Lewinsky. And it's for me at least, it was very moving. First, you have, someone who's the president. And even though most of us in this class desire perfection from those who are above us and we respect them in some ways, he was, after all, human, and so he fell victim to what is considered to be one of the most intense and powerful drives that exist in all of us, especially for men, which is the sexual drive. And so him and Monica Lewinsky, of course, she wasn't without fault. She tempted him, and he fell into the temptation. We are not talking about some Joe Schmo in the middle of the street that no one knows. We're talking about some guy who is on the world scene. He's also not single but married. He also has a daughter. He probably has parents, friends, a lot of people who had respected him. And so when the news broke out, if you know anything about Democrats, they are kind of gung-ho about family and family life and how to best protect them. In his State of the Union way back then, there was no mention of that because the story was out that he had this thing with Monica Lewinsky. He came on TV the first time and he said, "I'm sorry, but it wasn't convincing enough." So he came on TV the second time and it was a better show.
I remember it well.
Yeah. He talks about going to his wife, Hillary, and sitting on the bed and having a chat with her about this. And then at the end of that conversation, I haven't, by the way, watched the episodes. I just watched 4 minutes of, what this person who interviewed him talked about. And then at the end of his conversation with his wife, Hillary, she tells him, "Well, before the news gets to our daughter, Chelsea, maybe you should go have a chat with her." And so he does. And there is something about the way he expresses the story. There is something about his voice. There is something about his body language. There is something about his facial expression. And he kind of brings me or pulls me into his world, and I kind of feel bad for him, and I feel bad for just being human. there are a couple of things about forgiveness. Imagine for a moment that the story never broke out, that it was just something in confidence, him and Monica, that's it. There was no need to repent, there was no need to forgive. And the circle of people that would forgive you would just be limited to Monica Lewinsky, or maybe just Bill Clinton, depending on who did the most wrong. But the circle kind of expands a little. The news breaks out, and all of a sudden we live in a society that has categories of right and wrong, good and bad. And unfortunately for Bill Clinton, he was found to be a little too human. Okay? Sorry? To be a little too human? Yeah. And in the act of, I suppose, getting caught as being human, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, why? How could I have been so stupid? Now remember, without getting caught, you're never going to look yourself in the mirror with the sort of intensity that existed for him and say, how could I have been so stupid? Okay. Once in a while, you have pangs of your own conscience that comes about and says, maybe you shouldn't do this anymore. You know, as I forget the fact that I had a triple bypass just a few months ago, and that's what time does to you. You begin to forget the intensity of certain experiences and you fall back and just being stupid. Once in a while, I catch myself drinking Pepsi. It's not good for me. I don't drink very much of it, you know, maybe a couple of drops. Sometimes I catch myself having just a little too much sugar, especially in the office. I drink my coffee. And at certain moments, I catch myself saying, do you want to do this again? Do you want to like end up in the hospital? Someone cutting your chest open, and getting some veins from somewhere and planting them somewhere else. So sometimes you catch yourself not because of anyone on the outside. Your own experiences come forth, your own past comes forth, your own abilities to reflect come forth, and you say, okay, maybe you should stop. Most of us are not really that lucky. If you're not caught by your own conscience, you kind of just forget and you continue until someone tells you, you know, you did too much drinking, your liver, your kidneys, you're this, you're that. Oftentimes you get caught from someone on the outside. And that brings forth the birth of conscience. It's like you look yourself in the mirror and you realize how ugly you really are. But this particular mirror came from the outside. It's a wife, it's a husband, it's a child, it's a friend, it's a parent. It doesn't really matter. It's someone posting something about you on their Facebook page. And so, because all of us in this class live within the boundaries of culture, hello, and because every culture creates its own set of laws, do's and don'ts, you know, you have a very specific way of being wired. And so, someone in Norway, if they were to have sex outside of the boundaries of their marriage, they probably wouldn't feel anything, even if they were to get caught, because it's a different culture. It's a different software. Here in America, it's completely different. Okay. So what is bad in America is met with indifference in Europe, certain parts. There are degrees of forgiveness. If you're in a relationship and you have spent a good amount of time in that relationship, it's intense, it's intimate, people depend on you, you're responsible, you have created a lot of narratives. When you've done something that has crossed certain lines, it's going to be much more difficult for you to forgive. And it's going to be much more difficult for another to forgive you. Okay. The less intimate the relationship, you'll pass it by. It's not a problem. Okay. So when you talk about forgiveness, the first thing you need to ask is, what sort of a relationship are we talking about? If it's very, very intense and intimate, it's going to be much more difficult. And you're going to punish yourself, much more. There are two things. First, you and I live in the hands of time. One of the nice things about time is that in times of crisis, it moves very, very slow. But as the slowness goes away and you slowly begin to forget the experience, there isn't much to forgive. You forget. There is nothing to forgive in forgetfulness. As trigger points inside you are pushed, and that file opens, and memory pushes the experience out, once again you realize what an awful human being you are. And it's going to be very difficult for you to forgive yourself. Maybe another has forgiven you, but the ugliness of you presenting itself, shoving itself into your face, reminds you of your past. And you kind of feel paralyzed to move around for a few days, or a few hours, or a few minutes. The more your ability to forget, the less need to forgive. The less intimate your relationship, the less need to forgive. And it also depends on the transgression. If I catch you, for example, your essay being plagiarized, I'll talk to you in the office. Not really, but let's just say, right? And depending on how you were raised, I'll tell you, plagiarize, I've caught you, you have a 0. You can either show me the middle finger and say, F you, walk away, drop the class, or maybe not drop the class or not care. Or if your parents have raised you in a certain way, and if you have an ounce of conscience that brings about shame about you, then you're going to look at me and say, I'm really, really sorry. Can I have another chance? Whenever you transgress and you get caught, you find yourself in a good amount of poverty. I mean, it's interesting. Clinton was what, 1994? And this episode on Hulu, at least the 4-minute segment that I watched, his voice, his facial expression still contains so much pain. Sometimes you do certain things that every time you think about the things you have done, you can never forgive yourself. And it's a funny thing where he says, I can't even imagine the sort of weight she had to carry for all those years. Even when Hillary was debating Clinton, Hillary was debating Trump, she had mentioned something about him being with all these women, and then Trump shoots back saying, well, you shouldn't be the one to talk. I mean, look at your husband. I mean, we're talking about like 20, 30, 40 years have passed by, and just a couple of words from Trump opens all these memories, and they come forth. And Hillary, what can she say? And there is Bill Clinton, sitting on the top floor, and he looks down, and what can he say? So there are certain things that if you're reminded of, they'll come back to haunt you. One of the nice things about getting caught is, and that's one of the awful things about being a human being, you only appreciate things when you lose them. In being caught, you lose trust, you lose faith, you lose dependability, you lose care. There is so much that you lose. And even if the other person says, I forgive you, the truth is, regaining the trust and the faith and the love and all the things that come with it, it's going to take decades, maybe. And every time you pick up your cell phone and you're texting someone, your companion is going to say, and 10 years have passed by, what is this? Who is this? What is he saying? So there are lots of things to consider. Hello, how are you? I'm good. No, are you kidding? I mean, look at these people. There's no. Please.
I mean, society can punish you. You know,
The society can punish you. Again, it depends on the transgression. If you have someone like Harvey Weinstein, okay, you have someone like Puff Daddy. Is that the way you say it, Puff Daddy?
something.
Puff Daddy. You know, Love. Did I say it wrong? Yeah. P Diddy. Yeah. Yeah. Some transgressions really just harm society at large. Most often, most of us in this class, we don't have that much power. Our circle is about like 5 or 6, 10 people maybe in it. You know, but if you have the microphone, you have a lot of power and you have like 50 million followers, and then just in case you happen to be a predator, then everybody, you know, could potentially be a victim. How are you?
Doing well.
This is Laney College.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we good? Uh, the thing about doing something that crosses certain lines in a relationship, and then you get caught, in getting caught, there is so much sadness, and there is so much anger, and there is so much loneliness, and there is so much depression that are involved. And it's really, really tough to get yourself out. Your identity, your value, a whole host of things, just like it's a black hole. Everything just gets taken away from you. You know, because it is to some extent, you know, if for example, I get a call that my mom has died today, that's a huge loss. Okay. Consider you have built a relationship with someone. In that relationship, there is identity, there is value, right? There is all these narratives. In transgression and in getting caught, you lose the identity, you lose the value, and you have no choice but to be plunged into grief. And no one can accompany you in grief. It's a really, really difficult place to be. And the more you reflect, the more you think about it, the more punish you will suffer, the more torment you suffer, the more isolation and loneliness you will have no choice but to suffer. And even though your companion says, I have forgiven you, the truth is you yourself haven't forgiven yourself. So there are lots of different layers to consider. For the longest time in our human history, we had this belief in God. Lots of different forces came together, and that particular belief has kind of diminished in intensity a great deal. So it wasn't so much your husband catching you, your wife, or the public. It was namely God. And since God is omniscient, that God is everywhere, all knowing, all present, you would kind of reconsider some of your steps. You know. But when you have all these kind of lines or boundaries or ropes chained around your neck removed and you feel kind of free to do whatever. One of the nice things about the current climate is that because people really are not equipped to form relationships, and even if they are, some relationships out there, they don't really have much intimacy in them. And because there are lots of options out there, you're not really going to be very grounded in them. Just in case you transgress, it's not going to impact you that much. So you're lucky in many ways. Iska?
Sure. I have this problem during class. I'm usually writing the questions. If I have a question, I'll just figure out how to answer it myself. Either that means intuiting through it, running off of something, or looking it up. So I often don't have questions that I'm looking for answers for, unless, of course, I reframe the question as somebody else's opinion. So, what is your opinion when you just can't ask a question because you'll just answer it on your own?
Well, there are a couple of things. Can I self-indulge a little?
Of course, that's where you're going.
You're very kind. Thank you. This is my therapy session.
You may not be the first person to say that.
Yeah. So, 0 to about 16, 17, 18, I suffered the confusion that all teenagers suffer from. And when you have a good amount of confusion about you, you kind of feel homeless. Unlike Ivan, I would grow out my beard. Of course, his outfit is quite colorful. I would always wear black because I was always in mourning. Not mourning, like mourning. You know, like I am witnessing the death of myself once again as I wake up. And then I ran into a man. His name was Hussein. And I found a home in him. You know, I realized that he has answers to some of my confusions. And I wasn't really quite sure what my questions were, and I wasn't really quite sure how to decipher the sort of words that would come out of his mouth. But for some strange reason, they made me feel comfortable. And oftentimes I would go to a shop, he had a Persian market, the first in Sacramento. I would go there and sit for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, and customers would come and customers would go. I would just sit. And once in a while, I would have the courage to open my mouth and ask a couple of questions. For the first 5, 6 years of my relationship with him, there were 3 of us. Myself, Mehrdad, one of my good friends, and Hussein, another Hussein who was about 10 years older than I am. All 3 of us would have questions. And for about 4, 5, 6 years, we would all go in there with questions. At a certain point, we would actually go there with pens and notepads, and we would have written our questions down beforehand. And then our session would start, so do you guys have any questions? And our gathering would last from 5 in the afternoon, sometimes 6, all the way to 2, 3 in the morning. And we met 2, 3 times a week. And the times we didn't meet, he would come to the car wash, just make sure I'm okay, I haven't killed myself. I would go to his shop, and then of course he became a family friend later on. Then there came a point where we realized there is no reason to have a notepad and a pen. There is nothing to write down, and there are no reason to write down our questions. If it's intense enough, it stays inside you. If you care for a question that is related to you, it's not going to leave you. It has create a good space inside you. It's kind of like what we talked about forgiveness. You have an issue, and that issue pushes everything away and creates a home for itself. And even though you want to push that thing away, it refuses to leave. It's like a bad guest, okay? And so there came a point where we were still very confused, but we had found comfort in our confusion. It's kind of like if you've heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a woman who spent most of her years thinking about death, being around death, and eventually giving comfort to those who are dying. In the last stage of death, if I'm like on my deathbed, I have cancer, there's lots of pain, I've gone through lots of wrestling match with death, with my own issues, with my past, with being a human being. This last stage is called acceptance. I accept the fact that I lived a crummy life, that I shortchanged myself, I shortchanged my parents, I was a complete disappointment to God, to humanity, to my wife, to my kids. I've come to accept all of those things. And then I can close my eyes, take one last deep breath, and then go into the sunset. Okay. There came again a point for us where all of us were okay with being sad and miserable, knowing full well that there is an oasis in the middle of this desert called life, and that is Hussein. That's his house, that's his shop, And whenever we call, and sometimes we did at 1, 2 in the morning, and he would pick up the phone, and this is not yet the time for cell phones. And he would say, yeah, come forth, you know. And just in case we had broken a promise and we felt really bad for having broken a promise, we would go to him, regardless of time and day and those things. But there came a point where we all entered into his house with 0 questions. We were hungry. For what? I don't know. We had questions, but you couldn't put them into language and you couldn't put them in imagination. All you knew is that there was this big hole inside you. And there was a space, a container to hold this particular emptiness. And now I understand that when he would ask us, so any of you have any questions? When we would say no, it was such a burden on him now because he had to generate conversation. See, I'm very lucky in many ways. I can come to class and I can ask, so do you have any questions? And my good fortune is that I am in the presence of a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 19, 20 American-year-olds. America is a culture that creates issues for people. And so you can't find any hour of the class, any minute of it, where there are not going to be people with certain issues. So there are always going to be questions. Hello. But when I come to class and I ask, so do any of you in this class have a question? And there are no questions. And then I say, oh, shucks. Now I have to generate a question or I have to entertain these people for the next hour and a half. So do I understand a stage where there is a good amount of emptiness, and that has to do with being exposed to a lot of ideas, being exposed to a good amount of your own reflective abilities, having a lot of answers, having read a lot of books, having listened to a lot of audios, having engaged in a good amount of conversation, only to realize at the end of the day, they're all empty and hollow. You sit. There is a good amount of emptiness or darkness about you, but you sit. There are no questions to be asked. I've asked plenty of questions to realize that if the question comes out of me, so must its answer. It's a good place to be. But when you get to that particular stage, you have become such an awful human being. Because there is so much detachment about you. I understand you have a daughter, but you can be very intimate. I understand you're in a relationship. You're not very dependable. At any time, you're willing to walk out. Because that's what happens when you've asked a lot of questions, when you've read a lot of things, when you have walked into life only to realize life doesn't give you the things that you want. But you also appreciate the fact that you're a human being. Your body needs companionship. Your belly needs food. Once in a while, your daughter needs a few things. You're there for them. But there are no questions to be asked. Quinn. See, the only reason Quinn has a question is because she's not there yet. But she will be. All of us. Yeah. I was just joking, by the way. Yeah.
So, like, if you're trying to forgive yourself for things you've done, say you pretty much never will, you'll just have to, like,
Can I tell you a story? Why do you laugh, love? See what depression does for you? Now, it's a healthy depression, though. There's a difference. We'll talk about that on Monday next week. And there is this movie we were going to talk about that yesterday in my class, but we're going to talk about it tomorrow. But since we're going to talk about it today, we won't talk about it tomorrow, so don't show up to that class. Have you seen that movie? Pretty Woman? Julia Roberts?
Years ago, I.
She was very attractive. Was, past tense. And that should warn you about certain realities of life. People have an expiration date, especially in a youth culture, especially women. There's an expiration date, like milk. She was very, very attractive. She still is now, but not as much. In that woman, in that movie, she plays the character of a prostitute. There's a guy, he was very, very good looking, and he still is. And that's the problem with men. They have no expiration date. His name is Richard Gere. Have you seen him recently? His hair, high cheekbones, the way he smiles and the dimples, beautiful. So what you have is a young woman who's a prostitute. Now, I doubt very much when people are growing up and if they walk into a class and their instructor asks, who do you want to be when you grow up? You say, I want to be a prostitute. Unless you're living like 5,000 years ago in certain temples, okay? So the first thing you need to realize about Julia Roberts and her character in this movie is that life dealt her some really lousy cards. She was forced into prostitution. Maybe her father abused her. Maybe her mom was a drug addict. Maybe she was abandoned as a child. Maybe she had good parents, but they disowned her because she chose the wrong guy who was an addict. Okay, so we don't really know what happened to her. All we know is that she's a prostitute. She's also an American prostitute. It's not a prostitute in Norway where it's legalized and you have health care and the government in fact pays you. Talking about American prostitution. America is a culture of Puritanism. That particular philosophy creates a good amount of guilt and shame inside people. Okay? And it's also a craft that is frowned upon by religion and by society at large. Now, the movie doesn't say any of those things, but if you're clever enough, insightful enough, reflective enough, okay, you kind of summarize all of that for yourself. She's also highly paid. She's not $5 an hour. She's like $500 an hour. Now, before she becomes a high escort, there are a couple of things you need to consider. If she went into this particular business being a virgin and her first sexual intimacy is with a stranger and for money, that's a cross that not even Jesus carried. It's too heavy of a cross to carry. If on the other hand, she had lost her virginity to a man that she adored, and maybe the guy died, she fell into depression, okay? She had no education, no parents, no money. That's the only thing that she can do because she has a beautiful body and a beautiful face. Okay. So your first encounter with a customer as a prostitute, something you've never done before, it's going to be painful. As the both of you are engaged, you're going to have these thoughts in your head. You're going to have all sorts of feelings. And it's not going to be comfortable. And you will do it for any price because you need bread. you need a place to stay. If the guy says $5, you say, at least give me like a night stay at a motel, $25. By the time you become a high escort, you have had sex with so many different people, or maybe you just had the right connections, that the thoughts and the feelings that created guilt, shame, remorse, repentance, and about 75% of prostitutes, they become addicts. Okay? So by the time she gets up there where she charges $500 an hour, you're talking about someone who's become calcified. Shame and guilt have been forced out of her. And that's one of the things about us. The first time you do something, you say, why? But when you do it 20 times, you actually become very proud. Yeah, Connor.
Basically, it becomes from an act, and that's that of pure transaction.
Sure. Yeah. You put things so eloquently. I can't do that, so.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It expands my vocabulary. Thank you. You should do it more often. So she's standing in the middle of somewhere. And then comes this man. Pulls down the window. Yo! And she looks at him. Oh, he's gorgeous. You know his name? Richard Gere. She sits in the car and they go to his hotel room. But something strange takes place. Now, remember, by the time she's like $500 an hour, she doesn't need to forgive herself. Those stages are gone. She's far too unreflective now. Routine, and it's something she does. It's a profession. When I was 18 or 19 at the car wash, I remember I got a job at Caltrans in Sacramento. $80,000 a year. And all I had to do was punch in data. And I look to my right, there is a cubicle. And in that cubicle sits this like 50-year-old woman who's smoking. It was permissible way back then. The cubicle to my right was a man who was lotionizing his body. He was putting lotion on his arms and his legs. And then I was punching in data. And I look at myself and I say, really, this is the company I want to keep for the next like 50 years and this is what I want to do? I pack my stuff and I go home. And I wash cars. My parents are, what the hell are you doing here? I don't want to work over there. 80,000? Are you nuts? I may be nuts, I just don't want to be there. I wasn't under an avalanche of owning a house and paying mortgage. I was in no relationships. I had no kids. I wasn't paying loan cars. I had no debt. I had no obligation to life. And I didn't have this lofty image of myself in the future. I want to buy a house. I want to buy a car. I want to do this. I didn't care for the money. So things could still make me feel bad. And my further engagement in those things would make me feel worse. Okay? So because I was fresh, it made me feel bad, so I went home. By the time you get to Julia Roberts in the movie, she doesn't need to feel bad anymore. It's gone. When they get to the hotel room, something really strange happens. She goes to Richard Gere and she wants to pull down his pants. And that's one of the things you do. You're not there for intimacy. You're not there for a relationship. You're there for money. Get the job done and leave as quickly as you can. And by the time you get to $500 an hour, you have lost the ability to love, to intimacy. No trust, no love, nothing. You have nothing really except money. Okay. But Richard Gere says, no, let's have a drink first. Let's sit. Let's talk a little bit. It's a really strange thing, no? I don't know if you know much about my country, Iran. It's been oppressed for about 40 years. Before that, it was oppressed by the West, but all that story aside, we had a friend, a doctor guy, neurosurgeon, not very attractive, in fact, quite ugly. He goes back home, and that's what most people would do from the Middle East. They have their fun here, then they go back home to find a real woman to get married to. And so he goes back home and he finds himself a wife. A very, very, very attractive wife. Kind of like Julia Roberts, when she was young and unexpired. And I remember many years later when we were all sitting, this is what she told us. Iran is such a difficult culture to live in. In oppression, you lose your hopes, you lose your dreams, you lose your youth. When you cry, when you scream for freedom, no one cares because no one has any. And everybody just wants to get out by any means possible. This guy knocks on the door, my parents look at him, said, do you have a job? Yeah. What do you do? Neurosurgeon. Do you have a house? Yeah, 10 of them. How much do you make? $500,000 a year. What the guy didn't know is that this woman had a boyfriend and they were going to get married. But they didn't want to get married in Iran. So what she wanted to do is say yes to this man, come to America, get a green card, get her citizenship, divorce, then file a green card or a citizenship for her companion in Iran and have them come here. That was the intention. So they come here. They're married now. There is something really interesting about being a human being. You're like Aishwarya Rai, this Indian movie star. She looks like a goddess. Okay? And then you have someone as hideous looking as Snoop Dogg, or Eminem, or Justin Timberlake is actually nice looking. And then you would think that there is no way in hell that this woman will ever fall for this ugly, unattractive man. And as you spend time with someone, something about you has the power to overcome what you see. You no longer see the ugliness. You know the saying that the kingdom of God lives inside people? And by kingdom of God, I'm just going to simplify it. You see a guy as being very generous with his time, with his energy, with his money. He forgives, he's kind. He has so many wonderful qualities. And if little by little those qualities grew on this woman. And unbeknownst to her, one morning she wakes up and she says, I'm in love with this man. They have 5 kids. That other fellow from Iran, he would call her, she would never reply. So, prostitution down here in society. Richard Gere, he's a CEO of a company. He's got billions of dollars. He's up here. And these two worlds shall never meet. And if they do, it's going to be very brief. She's taken aback by his comment, why don't we just sit and have a drink? He's taken aback by his own behavior. He just wanted sex. But now there is something really unique and special about this woman. He doesn't really understand it. When they become a little intimate, then the sex happens. Then she puts on her clothes to leave. And he says something really interesting. Why don't you stay the night? You ask a prostitute to spend the night with you? I mean, you know the manager of this hotel, you know all the maids. What if they see you with her? He doesn't care about any of those things. And that's one of the things about power. And that power could belong to the people out there or could belong to you. Once you know something, once you know why you transgressed, you don't really care if anybody forgives you. You can forgive yourself. That's a tremendous amount of power to have. I mean, Marcus Aurelius, Stoic philosopher, he's like Jesus Christ of the Roman era. He conquers all the lands, he passes laws, he kills a lot of people. But he would go late at night into his tent and he would write and write and write about the frailty of being human, about the transitoriness of power. And he would be baptized by his own intellect, and that's all you need. Okay? She's about to leave in the morning. He stops her. Where are you going? You can't leave. Let's have breakfast. What do you want? For those of us who have some age and experience, when you go into any relationship, whether it's for 10 minutes or an hour, just for sex, it's what we call friendship or utility. Once you're satisfied, you pack up your clothes and you run. She packs up to run. She doesn't really want to. It's the first time she has tasted a modicum of stability. Someone asked her to spend the night with him. And her confusion grows because now she's asked to stay for breakfast. Then he goes to work, but before going to work, he looks at her and says, listen, there is this party that I have to go to. Why don't you come with me? And here's a credit card. Go downstairs and buy yourself an outfit. To give a complete stranger your bank account? Of course, she goes down. Everybody knows that she's a prostitute. No one really serves her. So she goes to a different location, comes back in 20 bags, right? But they go to a party, and she's really, really, really gorgeous now. You know, she's wearing this elegant outfit. As the relationship grows, he feels something he doesn't want to feel. I really, really like her. She feels something about him. She can't really voice it, which is, I think I'm in love with you. So you have two people liking each other enormously, but they're both very quiet about it. He's a CEO. He can't love a prostitute. She's a prostitute. She can't love a CEO. Just a complete mismatch. But emotions don't really care about social status. They don't really care about your past. And that's one of the nice things about love. It blinds you. You just better hope that you're blinded by the right kind of love. Okay? One day he's out, a friend of his comes in, and he knows full well that she's a prostitute because he told him. He says, hi, is Joe here? No. Well, take off your clothes, let's have sex. I don't want to have sex with you. Well, you're a prostitute. You can have sex with anyone. I'll even give you $50. Here's the money. She says no. As he's about to overpower her, Richard Gere comes in, picks up his friend, and shoves him out. She looks at him and says, you told him I was a prostitute? He says, I'm really, really sorry. He's begging for forgiveness. She says, fuck you, I'm not forgiving you. She leaves. She goes away, but when she goes away, you would think that she'd go back into her craft, prostitution. She can't. She knows too much now, and she knows too much because she's experienced something. And that experience has given her feelings about things that she had, but she had forgotten. And that's another point you need to consider. It doesn't matter how awful of a human being you are. There are still things about you that if someone can pull out, it'll baptize your past. I mean, look at Malcolm X. Beautiful story about a 20th century prophet with a past that all of a sudden just gets deleted. Okay? Now that she is in love, she can't go back to just sleeping with anyone. Okay. He, despite having lots of power and having good looks and being able to sleep with anybody, he is suffering from the same thing. He's in love, but love comes in a container. That container is Julia Roberts. She embodies the love that he feels. And you can't give that love to anybody else except Julia Roberts. So does love make you possessive? Absolutely. Does it make you jealous? Yes. Do you imagine that the other person is someone you own? Yeah. That's what love does. It creates a beautiful set of feelings and emotions, but it's also quite cruel. Okay? He's depressed. He talks to a few friends. They all tell him, and I suppose maybe kind of like this guy, his own conscience tells him, she had a life before you, you know. She's no longer living that life. You're in love. He gets in the car, stops at a flower shop, gets a bouquet, goes to where she lives, honks, climbs to the sunroof, climbs the ladder, and the movie ends. And in telling you the story or the movie, I have forgotten your question. But I think you have the answer. What was the question?
It was like get over what you did.
So let me tell you another story then. I'm just joking. Movies like this and lots of other movies, and they're all the outcome of human imagination and human experience. You know, it's not like just a movie. It comes out of what you and I experience on a daily basis. If you're lucky enough to be put in the proper physical space, that physical space has the power to create certain emotions about you. If those emotions are intense enough, they will go inside you and they will diminish the intensity of your past experiences. And little by little, again, if the space is the right one, if the emotions given to you by that space are the right ones, that particular space will engage you reflectively. You begin to examine, to observe, to think, and to learn. And then walk away. And you should always remember the saying that comes from one of the Gospels. You can't make the grass by pulling it. You may want to forgive yourself. You may want to forgive another. It takes time. And when that time comes, no one knows. It just one day magically opens and says, here I am. You're forgiven. But until then, you need to suffer. It's nothing bad. Avery.
Is it worth forgiving somebody? Like worth your time and energy, or should you just
Look at me. Can I create a scenario? Imagine you and I are in a relationship. God forbid, of course. You're young, attractive, I'm old and ugly. You're young and you have 60 years ahead of you. I'm old, I have 6 years behind me, and 10 really bad years ahead of me. But you and I have been hanging out for a while. You're 18? Let's say since you were 12. Just kidding. Let's say you do something wrong. Forget that. Let's say you come to class. For some strange reason, you enjoy facial hair, i.e. beard. You look at someone in this class and like Ivan the Terrible, say, oh my God, he looks so hot. Now remember, you and I are in a bona fide relationship. We have our wedding cards out there. It's just in a couple of weeks. I go out to buy milk. I come home and I see you with Ivan the Terrible. Forgive me, Ivan. You say, oh, Amir, I'm so sorry. What choices do I have? At my age, if I don't forgive you, who's going to take me to Kaiser? Where am I going to go to find another companion? Facebook? TikTok? I'll be upset, no doubt. Like a dog, you know, that's dying. I'll probably go somewhere all by myself. I'll be angry, hurt. You may call, probably hang up the phone on you. And then when the emotions subside a little, they diminish in intensity, you say, but I love her. But I love her. She's a blank, 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 but I love her. I call you. Let's talk. You say, Amir, forgive me. I say, okay. Well, you don't know I'm forgiving you. Sure, I'm blinded by the loss, the grief, my love for you. I also know my age. And at my age, the idea of going out and meeting people is not very appealing. I don't like people. It hurts my back walking out of the bed. Get in the car, driving to some forsaken place, sitting and listening to someone talk about things I'm not really interested. You and I have had a history. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it mediocre, but it's a history nevertheless. That history is like a glue. But you've also had time to reflect about the relationship. You say, oh, I'm young, he's old. I have another 60 years. And let's say it's reversed. I was the one who crossed the line, and you catch me with Ivan. Ivan, forgive me. And I say, forgive me, Avery. Does that make sense to you? Now, let me change that a little bit. You're 18, right? Let's say you have a boyfriend. Yuck. And let's say, even if your boyfriend has done no wrong, the fact that he's 20, that's just wrong, period. First, because men mature very, very, very slow. They're behind by at least 7 to 10 years. So if you're 18 and your boyfriend is 20, he's about 10. And when you hang out with a 10-year-old, they spill a lot of stuff here and there, and you got to clean up after them. Is it worth you forgiving this person? No. Is it worth you even having a boyfriend? No. At first, when I lived in Davis, my status as an immigrant was illegal. I worked as a janitor, going to houses and cleaning toilets and offices in Davis. You going out with a 20-year-old is like cleaning the toilet bowl every single day. Now, sure, you love him, fine. Sure, you have a history with this guy, fine. Sure, you have hopes and dreams that exist in the future, fine. Sure that you're a Christian, that every time he slaps you because he transgresses, you forgive, fine. Sure that your parents like him, fine. You're 18. You have no power in life. Instead of investing your time and energy and youth, investing hopes and dreams in a stupid 20-year-old, dump his ass. You want to have sex, have sex. You want a good time, have a good time, go to parties. You know? Moments of boredom, moments of loneliness, do what you need to do to overcome them. But invest most of your energy in what life demands of you, which is power. How many units are you carrying? Units, classes.
4.
12 units? It's nothing. You gotta carry at least 7 classes. Number one, when you're occupied by 7 classes, you don't have brain space to think about like romantic stuff out there. And even if you are, you're far too exhausted. One class after another, one assignment after another. Who's got time for boys or girls? Okay. Instead of spending the next 2 years of your life at Laney College, I mean, look at this place. It's a dump. You know, you're done with Laney. And don't apply to East Bay or San Francisco. Not even Berkeley. Stanford, Yale, Oxford, Princeton. Invest your time and energy in those things. When your intellect matures and when you begin to read books, listen to conversations, take the right classes, think about the things the right way, perhaps, hopefully, as maturity comes upon you, then you say to yourself, do not give that which is holy unto dogs. It's a saying in the Gospel of Matthew or Luke, I think. You have a body, right? And that body is attractive, sure. But your body houses experiences. Your body houses struggle and suffering. You put yourself to school. You have sacrificed a good amount of pleasures and desires for the sake of getting a master's or a PhD. You're a temple. Is it true that once in a while you have desires that all of us in this class have? Yes. Do you get into casual relationships? Yes. Do you want a relationship that is meaningful? Absolutely. But do you also know your value and worth? You can't know that at the age of 18. You have nothing. All you have is some DNA, some cells coming together, making you the way you are. Purely accidental. And guys out there, because we are visual animals, they look at this accident and say, I want it. And you hang out with anything. I hate animals. I mean, I like them. I just don't like pets. There is this cat. I don't like cats. I don't like dogs. I don't like people. I'm at a stage where I don't really like anything. But this cat just comes and just sits. I look at the cat, and the cat meows. What the hell am I supposed to do? The cat arouses empathy in me. I feel bad, I feel sad, I feel guilty. I have food to eat. The cat looks at me and says, I'm hungry, give me something. So you know what I do? I haul my sorry behind to Costco. I go to the pet aisle. And there are 2 different kinds of cat food. One is about $50, one is about $12. I don't have the issue with this cat. I'm not going to buy the bag that's $50. I'm going to buy the bag that's 12. And when I go to the counter, I'm going to ask for a discount. I have like 5 bags of cat food in my garage. And I give it food every morning before I head to school, which is about 4. And then when I get home, it doesn't matter if you like something or not. You spend time with them, like will grow on you. I hated my first 7 wives. I really just disliked them. I started hanging out with them, I liked them. Time passed, I realized why I hated them. I divorced them. The point is, just don't get into relationships. They're not worth it. But I do understand this culture. I'm offering you a shortcut, which is always difficult. A long cut is, take GEs, just take class after class to figure out what you like. Now, that may take you 2 years or 22 years. But you're an American, you have time. Old age will never visit upon you. You'll never die, you'll never get sick. You have plenty of time. That's the long cut. You'll get to be 30, 40, and you'll end up at Laney. And then maybe I'll still be alive at the age of 90. Say, oh, Avery, what are you doing here? Yeah, I went out and I got pregnant and I got 5 kids and the guy left me or he died or whatever. I got to go back to school. Well, shit, that was like 30 years ago. The shortcut is always difficult because you have to overcome things that are basic and instinctual. You see a guy, you like him. It's natural. But you got to be political. You have to be future oriented. It also depends on the transgression. What has he done? Yes? Yeah. And is it worth your forgiveness? And men and women do business differently. It sucks. I wish I could say good luck to you, but luck isn't going to do much. You need to think well. Yes, Carmen. We have like a minute. What time is it? Okay, Carmen, go ahead.
Who films and edits your YouTube videos?
There was this young woman. Love, why do you keep smiling, man? She was 16 or 17. This was about 25 years ago in a class. I was teaching this class, ethics. For some strange reason, she enjoyed my class. But you don't really enjoy a class. You enjoy the person who is doing the class. So she was enjoying me. And this is something I came to realize much, much later when I worked with my own teacher in a non-academic setting. And then I used to have gatherings at my house, and they came from Sacramento. And anyways, one day after having all these recordings, she said to me, why don't I create a channel for you? But she asked me this question at a very interesting time in my life. My health was questionable. And one of the things about getting old, but getting old reflectively, is that you realize something quite awful. Carmen, when this class is over, I won't see you till Monday. You know that. I won't think of you at all. It's like you've never existed in my life. You haven't left an impression. I don't find you interesting. I'm just, of course, kidding, but not really. And I realized that once I die, I will be forgotten. Not just forgotten to you people. More importantly, my kids will forget me. My wife will forget me. She lay next to a stranger. Can you even imagine that? In my absence. That makes me angry just thinking about it. So I said to myself, how do I make myself memorable? Now, you think I'm saying a small, insignificant thing. I'm not. At our very core, all of us in this class desire to be remembered. The only problem is, you can't be remembered if you've lived a small life. You know, when something is small, it becomes invisible. It's very difficult to see. So yes, her name is Cassie. Last name Lipovitz.
I meant like right now.
Cassie. She lives in Sacramento. She got her PhD in religious studies. She used to teach for us, but she now teaches other places. She's married and she has 17 kids. That's how they do it. And I keep telling her, Cassie, you have a full life. There is no reason to do any of this. She likes to torture herself. I let her. Hello. Ah, Connor.
Sorry, I have a class after this.
What do you have? What class?
Latinx studies.
The what?
Latinx studies.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Forgive me if I rambled on a bit too much. It's good to see all of you. Take care. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to go.
No, I understand.